I don't believe Islamophobia is a term
Exactly.
because a phobia is an irrational fear, and I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about the ideology of Islam. Any man who's afraid of Islam is a rational man because it destroys societies. It's destroyed the Middle East. It's destroyed the world for quite a long time. And again, Muslims are the biggest victims of Islam. I kind of talked to God like he was a person, even when I was a Muslim. And I would literally tell God, like, God, what is the point if you already chosen I'm going to hell or heaven? If I'm going to heaven, I'm just going to keep sinning. And if I go to hell, then I'm also going to keep sinning because I'm just going to be a nihilistic person. But somehow, like, that didn't make much sense. And most Muslims don't notice either that there's actually no free will, at least for Sunni Islam. I'm actually not quite familiar with Shia because there's a lot of differences, actually. But Sunni Islam, there's no free will. God has predetermined. And it's actually one of the six precepts of the faith for them, where there's like the holy books, the prophets, the angels, and then God has predestined you into where you're going to go. So that always bothered me.
Let me hammer that point. This
Yeah.
young man is from Sunni Islam. He's talking about Iman and Islam. Just I'm trying to help non-Muslims. As a Sunni Muslim, there are 6 articles of faith, Iman. 6 things you must affirm. The 6th, I have a hard time with the 6. I got a list. But anyway, it's Qadir, Takdir. What he's talking about, don't let the Sunni Muslims deceive you. In the authentic teachings attributed to Muhammad, if you're a Sunni, when I say authentic teachings, according to Sunnis, we're not talking about Shia, put them aside. He's not Shi'i. The Sunni Muslims, their authentic sources, their statements from Muhammad, that you must believe in predestination. Everything's written, both good and evil. Allah has written everything. So what he's saying is, he learned that as a young man, and predestination troubled him because Allah already predetermined whether he was going to be a Muslim and go to Jannah or an unbeliever and go to hell. So that was your struggle at the age of 13.
And even now, that means Allah has predestined me to be a Christian.
Yes.
And preach against Islam.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's Allah's fault then that I'm doing this. But one point I didn't bring up actually was how in the Quran it says about Jesus' crucifixion. This also bothered me earlier on, where it says وَمَا قَتَلُوا وَمَا صَلَبُوا وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They did not kill him.
No, repeat it because I want the Muslims to hear your Arabic. If you want proof this man knows Quran and he knows Arabic Quran, listen to him recite Quran from memory. One more time. Go ahead.
وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ إِلَيْهِمْ.
That sounds like a rap beat. Oh, shoot. Okay.
It kind of does, yeah. But they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but yet it appeared to them. And then after that, it says, وَمَكَرُوا وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. They deceived, but Allah is the best of deceivers. That's the verse. And it's talking about Jesus on the cross. And what he's saying is that everyone in the world who saw Jesus dying on the cross, it was a deception that Allah created. And that Jesus actually went up to heaven. And we actually don't know. There's a lot of like different ideas of what that meant. Some people say Judas died on the cross in his place. Some people say one of the disciples. I think it was Ibn Abbas who reported that one of Jesus' disciples
Yes.
stood up and said, "I will take your place."
Yep.
And then he looked like Jesus and took the place of Christ on the cross.
Yep.
And my issue is not even the story. My issue is, so basically, what you're saying is God has damned all these Christians because God deceived them. Like, think about that for a second. People who believe that this man was crucified and is the God man are deceived by the true God, and therefore they can't blame anyone else but Allah for them going to hell. That makes no sense in my mind. Where is the justice in this?
Brother, Allahu Alam.
Allah A'lam. Yeah.
Billah kayf, it's up to him, and Allah knows. Why you kafir? Why you have to question Allah? But go ahead.
Of course. The other thing too is, like I said this in the other podcast, where it's never trust an English version of the Quran.
Exactly.
So where it says, "Wa makaru wa Allah khairul makirin," they deceived, and Allah is the best of deceivers. These sons of guns, they translate it as they planned, and Allah is the best of planner. But I encourage everyone. I will literally write out the word in the comment section.
It's right here.
Meme,
You
okay,
said it,
there you
right?
go. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah,
Okay.
like meme alif kaf rih, like makr means makir, a deceiver, a deception. If you put that in Google Translate, just modern Google Translate, it says cunning, deceiving, lying. Like, so God is deceiving. And if God is deceiving, then how can I even trust anything he sells me? And all these questions kept coming to my mind as a kid. And a lot of it was like, I'm not sure why I didn't ask people about them, because I feel like the answer was always the same thing. Like, have iman, like just have faith. Don't worry about it, Allah knows best. Well, it's like the true religion because look at all the signs and the miracles in the Quran, stuff like that. So I just kind of ignored it for a long time. So yeah.
How old were you around this time when you were struggling with these issues?
14.
14
years old. Yeah.
Young man, the Spirit is already convicting him. Now, brethren, the verse is, as he said, 354. They translate, they plotted, and Allah planned too. But if you've gone to our sessions, I've done sessions, even Christian Prince has done sessions, Osama Dakdok has done sessions, David Wood. We give you the lexical evidence that the word makir, which he's referring to, means to deceit, to connive, to trick. The context of them tricking and deceiving them, what happened to Jesus. Now, I just want to give you some links to some articles on this issue, and I'll send them to you right now in the private chat. So if you go here, you put in Allah deceives. That's it, search engine, right? Allah and Satan. Who misleads who? The Quran testifies Satan is a lot like Allah. So you see, you just put in Allah deceives, and you'll see this article, and I show you that the characteristics of Satan are attributed to Allah in the Quran. I got this from a debate that Osama Dakdo did with two Muslims. One of the Muslims became a Christian. He had a debate, and he used these very verses to show Satan has the characteristics of Allah. Allah has the characteristics of Satan. The Muslim got so troubled, he left Islam and gave his life to the Lord Jesus Christ. So there you go, right here. So just put in Allah deceives. You can do that too, brother. Give me my blog. Who really is Muhammad's Allah? And right here, I give you the lexicon. The lexicon source right here. Mim kafra, to practice deceit or guile.
Makr, yep.
Yeah, right there. So he's fully, absolutely 100% on the money. This article I'll give you, but you just go to my blog, put in Allah deceives. So I just sent that to you. And here it is for the rest of you guys, and I'm going to give it to Rumble. All right. Now, all right, brother. So that was 14. And where were you living at this time?
I was in Egypt.
So in Egypt, now obviously these questions you had, you didn't air them out publicly, did you? Like, did you say it to your friend?
No, because they just kind of like, I try to hint at it sometimes where it's like, what did this mean? What does this mean? I remember one time, I was actually really young. This is like, if you like go back a little bit, I was at a restaurant with my family in Egypt, and I read how Osman, he burned some Qurans.
What?
Yeah, how he burned a lot of the copies of the Quran, and we only have one now because of that. Well, I didn't know that there was Warsh and all those other Qira'at at the time. And basically, Osman, the third caliph, got report that the Qurans were so different that people were fighting about it and killing about it. And so he sent someone, it was Zayd bin Thabit, and he went out, like took all the Qurans, made like an official one, and they burnt all the rest. And I remember as a kid, this was like really young. This was like 9. We were eating at a restaurant, and we were talking about the Quran, how beautiful it was. And I was like, yeah, it's so beautiful. And I remember, and I started saying like how like, yeah, they took the Qurans, and now we have one because of that. My dad was like, who told you this? I was like, I was reading in the hadith. Like, I was just reading it. And he's like, no, there's always ever been one Quran. I was like, well, no. It says right there, there's been many. And he's like, don't worry about it. He almost got a little bit upset. And when I saw him get upset, I just kind of dropped it and never thought about it again. But I think because I was innocent and I was just reading what the hadith said, it just came to my mind. I was like, well, it says right here there was many Qurans and they burnt them. And also, just to put something out there too, there's a concept called bid'ah in Sunni Islam, which means innovation. And my question for Muslims would be, if Muhammad didn't gather the Quran into one book, and it was only gathered 20 plus years after his death, wouldn't it be bid'ah to gather the Quran? Like, would it not be?
So you're saying, just so you can say, Muhammad said, bid'ah, innovation. You cannot innovate in the religion. You're saying the compilation of the Quran was a bid'ah?
It sounds like it, because at the end of his life, he said, Al-yawm akmaltu dinakum. Today I've completed your religion. But the Quran wasn't gathered together until 20 plus years after he said that and died. So obviously it seems that this must have been a bid'ah.
Yep, innovation. Yep, exactly. So your dad got upset.
We shouldn't even have Qurans, basically.
Yep.
We shouldn't really have like Qurans that are 114 chapters. They shouldn't exist.
Precisely. You guys understand, Muhammad said you are not to innovate in the religion. The Quran, 114 chapters, is innovation because Muhammad didn't do it. So when your dad heard you mention this, he got upset at you, you said?
I think he got more frustrated because it might have made some doubt in him. Like, it planted something he didn't like, and it just kind of like made him angry or like frustrated. And I was like, I'm just not gonna make my dad frustrated, because I didn't know what was going on. I was like 9 years old, so I just ignored it. And all these things I kept ignoring, and I'm trying to think of what else it would be.
And this is all, you're young, and where were you living? So people know when you're having these.
This is all happening in Egypt. Everything I brought up so far is in Egypt.
So this is his life in Egypt. You're having these doubts. They've been planning in you, but then eventually you leave Egypt, your family?
Yeah, we come here to Canada, and I go to high school here. And now I can actually talk about these doubts with people. Because over there, like, you can't just go around saying like, hey, why did Muhammad do this? Like, it's not a question you can bring up. And I remember I would ask a question to like atheists or agnostics and be like, this is kind of weird. And they'll bring up a verse from the Quran or the Hadith. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really bad. And then I have to go check it out. And then that's how I found out about morality issues, like when it comes to like child marriage, when it comes to like ma malakat aymanukum, what your right hand possesses, for sex slavery. There was other things too. I remember one hadith about, I don't know if I made this up or if it was true or if it was a weak hadith. It almost feels like a dream, but wasn't there a woman that they tortured to get treasure out of? Or did I make that up? There was, right?
It was actually the husband of Safiya they tortured, but there was a woman that they tore into half.
Yes, they tore her in half to get treasure.
Yes.
And I read that at 15. I was like, what the heck is this?
We get it for that, yeah. Kurfa, if you want to see how disgusting it is, they tore her in half. They had her tied to a horse and to a tree, and then she got ripped apart. Let me show you that, guys. What he's talking about. Kurfa. This comes from Sirat Rasulullah. Sirat
Rasulullah. The life of Muhammad.
Translated by Alfred Guillaume. I have it in my library. Page 665. Guys, I want you to see how evil and filthy this religion is. And Kurfa Fatima was taken prisoner. She was a very old woman, wife of Malik. Her daughter and Abdullah Masada were also taken. Zayd ordered Qais to kill Kurfa, and he killed her cruelly. Tabari recounts, by putting a rope between her two legs and to two camels. So it was two camels, not a tree. And driving them until they rent her in two. Her legs were tied to two camels, and when they ran, tore her in half. An old woman. This is Islam. Now here's the other article too. Here it is. This is Islam. Now I'm going to send you the link too as well, brother, for the documentation. All right, now watch here. Save the
Lord have
material.
mercy.
Yeah, I know, right? But we got to expose it, man.
I
Now
know, but
notice what he said.
reading it is just terrible.
Of course it is. Now notice what the brother said. He said he started questioning when he was in Canada. Because in Egypt, if you started having these questions, what would they have done to you?
Oh, worst case scenario was like prison.
Right.
Like
But
if you
now,
leave Islam in Egypt, you can go to prison.
yeah, and now, but sadly, it seems like in Canada, you can go to prison if you talk about Islam, right?
It's getting there. Like it's getting pretty bad.
So now here again, quoting Al-Tabari, and I have it. Tariq al-Tabari, History of al-Tabari in English. I have this quote. Early AD 628, during a raid, Zayd, Muhammad's freedman, adopted son, was wounded and some of his men were killed by a tribe. Zayd vowed to abstain from sex until he took revenge. After Zayd recovered from his wounds, Muhammad sent him and a raiding band back to the tribe. An old woman named Kurfa was taken prisoner. No, old woman. Would a Muslim leader spare her from death, not to mention from torturing her? No. Her death was cruel, says an Islamic source, matter-of-factly. This is history of al-Tabari. The executioner appointed by Zayd tied each of her legs with a rope, tied the ropes to a camel, and they split her in two. There you go. So he's not lying. So, brother, you in Canada were exposed to this kind of stories, right? So what happened then? What happened to your...
There was one YouTuber called the Masked Arab.
Yeah.
He did it both in English and Arabic, and everything he said was 100% true.
Right.
And it just like it was crazy. So after all this, reading about it, and then reading about just honestly, every hadith I read, there was like something wrong. There was something, and I just came to the conclusion like, how can I be more moral than the mercy to mankind?
Yep. Precisely.
Like, I can't be more moral than the guy who's supposed to be the role model for the rest of humanity. And it just crumbled. It literally crumbled into thin air. And I remember knowing it was fake, knowing that it wasn't true. I still did salat. I still prayed. And it was like the emptiest prayer I ever did in my life. Because I wanted to see if God would answer anything. But yeah, he didn't. And then I just left Islam completely.
So your brother, though he believes Islam passionately, doesn't practice it, and he doesn't want to hear criticisms of Islam. And your mom, you're saying, is pretty much agnostic. So that leaves your dad. Is your dad still devout?
He's quite devout. He's quite devout Sunni Muslim, yeah.
How did that affect your relationship then?
When he found out, I've only seen my dad cry twice.
Ooh.
The first time was when his mom died, so my grandmother, when I was 6. And then when I told him I was a Christian. And the second time he cried, it was the worst cry I've ever seen ever.
Wow.
It sounded like someone died. And I was in shock. He was on the ground bawling, and I just wanted to help him. But I also can't deny my Lord. And I can't, I'm just stuck there. And the rest of the family is looking at me, yelling at me, saying, I'm the reason why.
Wow.
Wow,
what a reaction. Did you guys hear what he said? His mother died. He was broken, cried, but he wasn't as devastated. He was on the floor, just like crying on the floor when he found out his son became a Christian. Because to him, at least his mother died a Muslimah. She'll be in Jannah. My son, on the other hand, he's going to now become an enemy of Allah and cursed, and he's going to hell. So that's why it was more devastating for him. And your family's looking at you, do something, all that. And then what happened?
He sat down and he told me to tell the story. And I told him the story of my conversion to Christianity. And after I sat down and I told him everything, he looked at me and he said, yesterday I was 6 feet tall. Today I'm underground.
Wow, you buried
in Arabic it makes more sense, but it basically means like I killed him on the inside. And
you buried me. That's what he's saying.
You buried me.
Tall, but you buried me. I am now dead. Yeah. How many years ago?
3, 4.
Wow, so it's not too far away.
No, And for the whole year after that, he didn't he didn't say I love you. He would talk to me very, very little.
So you became agnostic, atheist. What happened, man? Now you're Catholic, dude. What? What
Yeah. So 2 years from 16 to 18, I was agnostic atheist. I thought religion was the stupidest thing. And I did a lot of smoking weed and drinking and just the stupidest things you could do. And just I know, right? It's stuck for the law. And it's just like I just kind of just lost my life. Uh, and I thought I was okay. I thought that I would be all right. Like I would find another purpose. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to university. I actually told myself like I'm gonna become a dentist, not because I like dentistry, but because they make a lot of money. That was my thought process. Okay, maybe money now can fill this up. All right, that and like, but I thought about it and I was like, that's not gonna do anything. I hate dentistry. Or maybe I can just, you know, sleep around a lot or something, and that didn't do anything. Drugs will do it. Nothing. Nothing. Everything I tried to fill my life with, disappointed completely.
Hmm.
Until one day, I took a lot of weed. I did a lot of edibles, and I drank a lot, and I went into psychosis. And they were taking me to the hospital, and I was crying out to God. I was like, "Allah anqizni," like God save me. And and
You know, I'm
I
laughing.
made it.
I don't want to
What?
cut you off. When you finish, something happened to me the same way. But go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to share the
Like,
story. That's why I'm laughing. You and me are so similar. So you went into psychosis. You thought you were about to die. Then you finally became religious. So what happened? Yeah, say that again.
yeah, when you're at the bottom, that's when you start talking to God. But yeah, but I'm sitting there and like I barely remember any of it because I was like it was all psychosis, and apparently I was foaming from the mouth and I was screaming to God in Arabic to save me, and um I go to the hospital. I don't know what happens, but I wake up the next day and I'm at home with my parents and my brother, and they tell me what happened, and I just made a pact with God, and I was like, all right, God, if my life does not get better, then I'm just gonna have to end it. Like I'm going down a route where like I'm probably gonna want to be dead anytime soon, anyways. So basically, I get to that was around August of 2018, and I joined university in September 2018.
Hmm.
And I'm walking down the hallways, and I see this guy, and he's giving out these like pamphlets, and I look at it, and it's like a ministry thing, and apparently there's like something you have to sign up for. So I put my name and my number, and I give it back to him, and I don't even think about it. And then he texts me at 10 p.m. at night, and his name's Michael, and he says, "Hey, it's
Hmm.
Michael from this Catholic society on campus. Do you want to come and like talk about like faith and do like a Bible study?" And I was like, I really don't. No, I'm very happy with my life. I'm just gonna not do this. But then he's like, well, we're gonna have like drinks and pizza and stuff, and it's gonna be girls. It's like, oh, 100%. I'll come on. Then why not?
Girls,
So I
huh?
go over there. Yeah, that's he literally. Honestly, I'm gonna give him props. He kind of like played it. He was like, well, it's not really like a Bible study. It's more philosophical. And I remember, I remember the first page. I have a little booklet, and I open it up, and it says God's love for you. And I look at him and I say, "This is not philosophical." And he's like, "No, it's very religious." And I was like, "All right, I'm already here. I'll just finish it." So I go in and we do this face study thing. And I wasn't going to come back actually afterwards, but I leave the room and I see people praying, and I see people like with their rosaries, just in the spirit, reading Bibles. And I convinced myself to come back every single day to tell them why their religion is false. Because I was like, I left Islam. Now I want people to leave all religions because it's a lie. Like I'd rather people be like depressed and know the truth than be happy and know a lie. I thought I was saving them. I had like a savior complex. So I'd come in every day and argue with them over and over and over. And just coming from a Muslim background, for everyone listening, never give personal experiences as evidence for your faith.
Say it
So
again. Repeat
never
again.
give never give personal experiences as evidence for your faith,
Good. Go ahead.
because if it actually makes you look bad. I remember vividly someone said they heard a choir at a mass and then they had their conversion, and someone else said that like they were listening to music, and this one like I was praying in adoration, which I didn't even know what it was at the time, and then I met God, and I was like, so you guys are just insane, basically. Like you're just having like
Yeah.
euphoric moments. Like that wasn't convincing at all. Like to say like I felt good, therefore God exists, and I entertained it, and I tried to like debate with them and talk to them a lot. Um, Eventually, they invite me to go to a cottage trip, and again, I'm the only person who's not a Christian, or even there were some Protestants, and I think there was one Orthodox, but most of them are Catholic, and they all invited me on this cottage trip, and I'd be the only non-Christian, basically. So I go with them, and it's a weekend, and they all want to go to mass, so I have like no choice but to go with them. And mass was very disturbing from a Muslim perspective.
Mm.
And I want to say this too, like I'm not a stickler for proper ways, quote unquote, of how to do mass. I think there's very beautiful ways of doing mass in different ways, but some reverence would be nice. Like I remember people wearing like tank tops and like
Mm.
people talking while the priest was giving the homily, and just there wasn't much reverence. There was a lot of reverence in the Eucharist part, but there wasn't much reverence for most of the rest of it.
So let me understand. The particular mass you attended, you had people in tank tops, you're saying?
There was like maybe like two people.
Tank tops. And you saying that when the priest was giving a homily, they were just talking out of turn?
Yeah, and it was just like I feel like some people like now this was a small town, so maybe they're just there because it's cultural. Maybe
Yeah.
there's not much faith there, and I don't want to judge them at all. Maybe they have beautiful faith, but it seemed from a Muslim's perspective or like a Muslim background perspective almost unholy. Like when we're praying in the mosque, no one's talking. We're all in unison saying Allahu Akbar, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're all going together, and it's up and down together. And sometimes when I'm at mass, it feels like I'm almost distracted by people, and I'm not paying attention to what's going on. And that's just like a side note that I noticed right away. It
Let me
was
let me hammer on why you would have noticed this much more. Now, guys, understand. I'm hammering why for him these things stick out. In a Muslim context, when you go to the mosque, he'll tell you women, men are segregated. Men and women do not co-mix. Men are in the front, women will be in another room. So there is no I'm next to a woman and when you gather, you stand shoulder by shoulder, no spaces, and you pray in rows and you follow the imam. So this is what he's accustomed to. Women isolated, women some other part of the mosque. Women and men do not mix. They don't pray together. Men form rows and they stand shoulder to shoulder, try to leave no space and follow the imam. That's for them worship. And another thing, you don't let the Quran touch the ground, right?
no, never.
So this is his context. So he goes into liturgy. He sees people with tank tops. If someone came in a tank top in the mosque, what would they do?
They have to leave right away. To be told to leave.
So
If you
these
wear
are
shorts at the mosque, you're told to leave.
yep. You'd wear shoes and what? Say it again.
If you wear shorts at the mosque, you have to leave.
And you can't walk in with shoes,
You
right?
can't walk in with shoes, no,
So
because it's
this
like
is his
quote unquote holy ground. You can't just walk in.
this is his so to him he's more sensitive to these things. So, okay, so then go ahead. What happened after that?
The only part that was like very reverent was the Eucharist part, where the priest holds up the host,
Yeah.
and everyone was silent and they were kneeling and looking up to it, and I was like, okay, this is proper. But the rest of it seemed very off. And it seemed very off too because everyone was talking before and after the mass. So like the priest left, but like the sanctuary was almost like a social gathering. So the priest is gone, but everyone's like, "Hey, let's go get coffee afterwards." Like we could talk about this outside the church. We don't have to talk about it inside the church. But that's just something I noticed. And afterwards, this woman comes up to us, invites all of us to her house for dinner. And again, I don't have much choice in the matter because everyone else is saying yes, and I'm not really like accustomed to Christian friendliness at all. Like in my mind, there's like a barrier between strangers, but because they're all Catholics and they all know they have like a knowledge of each other and they're all there for the same purpose, they're a lot friendlier with each other. And I was like, okay, I'll go with them. So we go to this woman's house and we have dinner. And it was after the dinner that I actually had my conversion. And during this whole time, I was actually reading uh, ancient Roman and Christian scriptures to try to like. Remember, I was trying to debate the Christians. I was trying to prove their religion wrong
Yeah.
through logic. And by doing that, I was reading through Josephus and Tacitus, and I was reading through the New Testament. I read the New Testament at this point maybe 6 times just to try to disprove the Christians. And every time I'd read it, the morality of Christ kept like was so beautiful. Like the Sermon on the Mount, it wasn't about like just lusting, like me physically doing zina, like committing adultery in Arabic, but it was about where's your heart at? Like, are you like lusting? Or you look at a woman and you're like continually lusting in your head? It wasn't about, oh, I didn't murder someone, therefore I'm good. But it's like, do you hate your brother? And so that kept like coming back to me, that the morality of Christ was so powerful. And it was always his words. It was Christ's words specifically that I am the true vine. I am the good shepherd. Like the Gospel of John, like was wow to me.
Hmm.
It was a literary genius. I thought I didn't realize anything was uh, divinely inspired. Right? I didn't believe in that.
Yeah.
But the Gospel of John, I was like, whoever wrote this is a literary genius.
Hmm.
Like it is so beautiful, and I don't believe anything that's written in it. But it's a beautiful story. Like one of the stories that really caught me was the story of the blind. What chapter is it? Where the blind person
John, Pool of Siloam, John 9.
yeah, yes, John 9. And then he goes and the Pharisees question him. He's like, I don't know who this Jesus person is. Maybe he's the prophet, but all I know is I was blind, now I see.
Hmm.
And I was like, this guy's faith. He didn't even know who Jesus was, but he just had faith. And then the thief on the cross, he put his faith in Christ at the last minute. And something kept speaking to me through their faith
Hmm.
and these stories. So this is all going in the back of my mind while I'm talking to the Christians. Again, me not thinking it's true. It's just a story. And we get to this woman's house. We have dinner. We sit there and we're praying after dinner. And they're praising God through songs. And it was through this praise and worship where I realized that they were so devoutly like with God. They were giving their full life to God. And I never saw so much joy and happiness on people's faces.
Hmm.
And no matter how much logic I had, no matter how many books I read, no matter if it was I read every single church father, I read the Roman writings about Christ and how blindly the younger, how there were Christians calling them cannibals.
Hmm.
I read all of that at this point, and I was like, this was selling it for me. I was like, these people have something I don't. And I asked Jesus to let me feel this. And as soon as I asked him, I felt it. As
Hmm.
soon as I asked him, the Holy Spirit entered me in a way that just like it was almost like there was a hole in my heart and it
Yep.
was
No,
filled up. It was filled up completely. And I had to leave the house and people are coming after me like what's going on? And I was like, I don't know. And then I go up and I look at the sky and I see the sky and it's so beautiful. The moon's shining and it's almost like everything was like grayscaled and now I can see color. Like everything was just changed. And I look at the people who came after me and they were so beautiful. They were
Hmm.
beautiful because they were God's children. And I knew like who Jesus was. I knew he was God made man. I knew he died for me. I knew I had to get baptized. Somehow I knew that at that moment. And I knew that I wanted to give my life to him. So I gave my life to Christ.
On that
And
spot right there, huh?
right then and there, I looked at my watch. It was 9 p.m. October 7th, 2018. And I was like, Christ, I give you my life. and I've never looked back.
So notice October 7, 2018, and you even know it's 9 p.m., right?
Yeah.
Now you notice how you came full circle? I want to show you something. Guys, I want you to hear full circle. At first, he saw people testifying about their own personal experiences, and he laughed at it. So God laughed at him because it was his personal experience that converted him. See how God has a sense of humor? I wanted you to catch it. Remember a few minutes ago, he said to you, yeah, don't use personal experience because it's subjective, and he's right. But then what did God do? He gave him his own personal subjective experience that was supernatural, that he knew he could not deny, and he knew it wasn't simply his overactive imagination. So the Lord, having a sense of humor, took his own, how do we say, skepticism towards personal experience and had him have a miraculous personal experience that converted him.
Mm-hmm. And it was funny too, and I can't convince anyone about Christianity through that.
Exactly.
There's no way. I can't be like, I know Jesus is real because on October 7th, 2018, I had like a euphoric moment. No one's going to believe anything I say after that. So, yeah.
So you see how God has a sense of humor, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were scoffing at personal experience. Ha ha ha, that doesn't prove anything. Ha ha. Then,
yeah, exactly. He humbled me real quick. Yeah.
So during that time, you were saying you were studying sources. You studied Pliny the Younger and others about the Christian movement and Christ, and you're trying to study early Christian sources. In your study, you were hoping to refute Christianity, but then what did you discover? Because as you're studying these sources, your potential was to show how these sources refute Christianity, but obviously it didn't. You're now a committed Christian. So what did those studies lead you to conclude?
That there was a very, very high chance that Christ rose from the dead. Like, that was my main thing. I was like, I just got to disprove that Christ rose from the dead. Like, that's all I had to do, and these Christians would believe me. Because I was trying to use their own scriptures against them. I was like, St. Paul says, if Christ has not risen, our faith is in vain. I was like, okay, Christ is not risen, guys. Your faith is in vain. And they would leave their faith. That was my mission. Yeah. But everything I read was like, what other explanation can explain this? Like, hallucination made no sense to me. Yeah. Because hundreds of people, his followers and enemies, all saw him at different times and places, and they couldn't corroborate them. Like, there was no way they could, like, there couldn't be like a secret going around where they're doing this, or conspiracy. Even the Jews admitted it, because they were like, they could have just been like, this body is right there. What do you mean he's risen? But they had to lie, and they were like, oh, they stole it. And by saying that, they admitted it. Yeah. And then the Romans admitted, because they were like, they're saying this Christ guy rose from the dead. I don't remember what letter it was that I read, but it was one of the Roman officers or governors. Yeah. And they didn't even try to disprove it. They were just like, oh, like, whatever. It's like, it's foolishness and magic. Yeah. Meaning that they were trying to give an excuse. They're trying to give an excuse of why what was happening. And everything else was like, every other explanation made no sense to me.
Yep, this is what we call the minimalist facts approach. And so notice, as he's trying to find arguments against Christianity, he's encountering arguments for the resurrection to counterbalance the arguments against Christianity. And he's seeing the case for the empty tomb and the apostles, seeing Christ alive, and were so convinced by the experience that they're willing to die for it, was overwhelming. So notice, this is the approach taken by apologists to try to convince skeptics like him. I just want you to understand this approach. Start with historical facts that even historians and scholars who are not committed Christians affirm. Let me repeat. Start with historical facts, facts that historians and scholars will accept, even those who are not committed Christians. For example, you may not know this, guys. Bart Ehrman says, as an historian, it's a fact that Christ was killed. As an historian, it's a fact that his followers believe to have seen him alive physically, bodily. He says his followers had visions where they were convinced he was raised physically and bodily, and now lives in heaven physically and bodily, that convinced them to be God. That's Bart Ehrman, he says. Historically, indisputable. Even Gerard, I have a hard time pronouncing his German name, Gerard Ludemann, an atheist historian on historical Jesus. As an historian, he admits the disciples were convinced they saw something that left no doubt in their minds. Christ was raised physically and the tomb was empty. And that's what they believed they saw, and they were convinced of it. That's what started Christianity. But as an atheist, he doesn't believe in God. So this is what's happening to this young man. He's saying, though I'm trying to refute Christianity, on historical grounds, these are facts. Facts admitted by historians on the life of Jesus and scholars. Many of them were not Christians, even Jewish historians and scholars. Fact one, Christ was killed on the cross. Fact two, a member of the Sanhedrin buried Jesus' body. Now, why do most scholars accept that second fact? Let me explain to everyone. I'm trying to fill in what led you to say I can't refute Christianity. Why do scholars, most of them, believe the story that a member of the Sanhedrin buried Jesus in his tomb is factual? Because the Sanhedrin is the group that condemned Jesus to die, and therefore, to make up a story that one of the members buried Jesus in their tomb is highly unlikely. And the other related fact is that the burial story is very early, so early that the Sanhedrin were still around. And so if this was a lie, the Sanhedrin would have exposed it. Am I with me? On those historical grounds, they take the burial of Jesus by a member of the Sanhedrin to be a fact. Third fact, a group of women found the tomb empty. Majority of scholars accept that as a historical fact. On historical grounds, it was a group of women. Now, why do they accept that as fact? Because in first century society, Roman, pagan, Jewish culture, the testimony of women was considered null and void, worthless. So if you're making up a story about discovering the empty tomb, in that culture, you don't make up a story that women discovered the tomb empty, because that would discredit your testimony and get people to laugh at you. So why did the Christians make up the story? Women found the tomb empty? Because they're not making up a story. It was simply a fact. That's why most scholars accept that third fact. Fourth fact that most historians and scholars, many are not Christian, I'm not lying, Bart Ehrman, Paula Friedrichsen, these Jewish scholar. Fourth fact that you can establish on historical grounds is that the very disciples of Jesus, were convinced they saw their Lord alive physically, and they're convinced that he went to heaven physically, starting Christianity and transforming their character. So this is what happened to him. He's seeing how Christianity originated, and originated because of the resurrection appearances, convincing Jesus' followers to be willing to die for their belief. We saw him alive. He's not dead. The tomb is empty. He's alive in heaven. Bodily will return. And he knew he couldn't explain that away. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly what happened. But not even with like modern scholars, with the people from the time period. Like they were giving excuses. They were just saying like they were basically, it was like saying like my dog ate my homework type of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you just didn't do the homework. Elizabeth, that's what it is. Then the most obvious explanation is that he rose from the dead. And I remember before I had my spiritual, like, for lack of a better phrase, my conversion moment, like I almost like came to a conclusion logically, like, yeah, okay, he rose from the dead and he's probably God. And I was like, okay, so what? Like, it doesn't change my life. My life's not changed. So God again humbled me by changing my life that same day, and then giving me that experience, and then putting me on the road to baptism, first communion, and confirmation.
Amen.